Yo, yo, yo. Hey, guys, welcome back to another awesome edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. Our jam around here is to find the greatest experts and bring you the best information to help you create a better practice and a better life. And today I have back Miranda Beeson, and we break it down how to take your practice from chaos to control, how systems really transform your practice. We've been doing this a long time. And one of the cornerstones to really organizing your practice and your life are called systems. So in a recent presentation, we laid out the entire framework. And so I thought, let's share the audio version of that presentation. So here it is. So please listen up. I hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you soon. Today, we're going to be talking about a favorite subject of mine and yours and everybody else on this team is systems. How do systems transform your practice? And I love the title that you came up with, From Chaos to Control. Those are two completely different states of mind. And before we get rolling here, I always like to tell people you're welcome to come join us. Tomorrow is the second session of our Q4 to the Top Study Club. So we have over 40 dentists coming from all over the country. And it's an awesome opportunity where if you want to come and think in a room with some other incredible entrepreneurs, get some great content and leave inspired, it's from 8 to 3. Now, tomorrow might be a tight turnaround for a lot of you, but in the future, you're welcome to join us. And we believe in it so much, we have what's called a golden ticket, which means you can come for free. And you can be our guest. We'll feed you, we'll entertain you, we'll educate you. You're going to learn a ton. And if you hate it, just take all the information and go. But we know that's not going to be the case. So you're welcome to join us. Free, no of charge. Be our guest for the first time. And it's a golden ticket. You have to reach out to Gina, Gina, on our team, and she'll be your personal concierge. Now, another thing is I'm going to show you a lot of stuff today, and we're rolling out a lot of new elements to help you create a better practice and a better life. We basically do 3 things, and that's all we do. The first thing we do is you can do it on your own. So we have a lot of great resources, education like today, a lot of tools, resources. This is all we do. We're weirdos. We're geeks about like what makes the best practices work. So don't try to figure any of this out. This is all we do for our jobs, our careers, is to figure out what the best practices do. That's why it's called the Best Practices Association. And our job is to share all that with you. So we've organized it in an incredible resource called the Best Practices Association. We have our own personalized app that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. The first version of it's going to be free. Isn't that cool? So you can join us and you're going to have a ton of information back there. If your team meetings are terrible, don't do that anymore. Let us run them. Join the BPA. So level 2 is you can do it in a group, which is the To the Top Study Club. Being a dentist is very lonely. Being an entrepreneur is very lonely. Don't do that. You have to surround yourself with great people. I always tell my kids, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. So my question to you, if you're watching this, is who are you hanging around with? Because you're the average. Go into a room that challenges you, and To the Top Study Club definitely does it. And then lastly, if you've tried everything, you're like, I've tried everything. Nothing works. We have what are called our pro coaching program, which is really the best offering we have. And you're going to see Miranda is a pro coach. She's also a leader here. And we make you do it. We're your Sherpa up this mountain. We're part of your leadership team. We are the ones that come in and make offices do this. And we hold you accountable in that process. So that's a little bit about what we do. You could pick your journey here. So join us at any level. We're welcome. We're so excited to have you. Now, I'm going to throw a ton at you in the next hour. Some of you are going to go, holy moly. All of it is organized back in the BPA. If you just struggle with anything, we're going to go to the practice tools component. And you're going to see all of this is organized by name with all of the resources and all the PDFs. You can download them and you can go through them one at a time on your own or with your team. So all of it is back there. And like I said, we have our app. You can take it on the go right now, and it'll be personalized, our own personal custom app, which we can't wait for. It's going to be so exciting. So any thoughts before we get rolling? Because I'm just going to go and you're going to have to reel me in here. So
that was amazing. I think you crushed it, and I'm ready to get started. This is going to be great.
All right, today, awesome. We're going to talk about chaos to control, how systems transform your dental practice. Now, there's two mindsets in dentistry. You know, there are practices we go to see, and this is what we see all day long. It's this, it's that, it's all over the place. It's sticky notes. It's like, how do I find that? Where do I go for this? What just happened? And then you've got this kind of an operation where it's organized, it's calm, it's predictable. I thought about this yesterday when we were talking, like, it's amazing when businesses can make promises and keep them. Think about that. We're telling patients what happened and we're delivering on them. It's powerful when you can do that in the marketplace, but when you're making it up all the time and just trying to get through the day, that's called chaos. You ever get in your car and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that's over. I'm just so glad that's over. I can't even listen to a podcast on the way home. I have to listen to smooth jazz just so my heart rate will go down. That's what I used to do. Or you can live in control. And when you do that, you're going to see it makes sense. The theme this week, I love this one, is meaningful work. Like, it's meaningful. You feel like you actually feel like you accomplished something. What we want you to do is go home and feel like you accomplished something instead of saying, I just got to get out of here. And a big piece of that is how well is your work organized. Now, here's why having defined systems is important. Now, I'll tell you the evolution of ACTS. So this is, almost 30 years of doing this. Back when I was 24 and 25, and I'd go into a dental office, and if any of you are listening and you were former ACT clients, you'd go, that was really hard when Kirk would come in, because I would make them write system after system. I wanted a system for the toilet paper. And by default, by writing all those systems, they just got organized. Chris Leiser, if you're listening, Chris was like, that was so hard. I wrote so many systems. But by writing them, things got better. We knew where things were. We organized our days. By default, you had to think about how you were doing things. And by default, you had to say, well, that's not a good way to do it. Let's do it better. And when new team members came in, they were able to work right away. Janine Hewitt, if you're listening, shout out to you. Her daughter's now working in the practice. She was not part of the whole process. I met her for the first time one time. She's like, oh my gosh, it's so easy working in my mom's office. She has all these things called systems. Everything is written out. Like, it's all right there. I don't have to ask anybody. I can, but it's all right there. Systems alleviate many of the common pain points that dental practices have. I always say this, don't blame a person, blame a system. It's really easy to blame a person. But when you define a system, when you really do it the right way, now you can have people do it the right way, and your practice does it the right way. It's just easier to work that way. You enjoy your days. You love a day when it goes the way it should. Think about that. That's revolutionary, isn't it? And when you document them and you've implemented them, it significantly reduces the drag on everything, the stress and the fatigue, just by streamlining some of these tasks. Even if it's just a simple checklist, it just creates more of a collaborative, organized work environment. And this ultimately will lead to a stronger team culture where every team member feels empowered and accountable, and ultimately enhancing how they feel. The opposite is, I don't know what just happened today. I just got to get out of here. It's crazy. You know what I mean? And I say this all the time, but I really do believe this. There is no greater fatigue, none, not one in the entire world, than mental fatigue. Mental fatigue is actually super dangerous. You actually love physical fatigue. I love physical fatigue. When I work hard and it's organized, it feels so good. When you cut the grass and you organize the fridge and you clean the garage, that's hard. But then I don't know if you guys are like me. I open the garage door and I look at it and then I close it and then I open the garage again. Or when I put all the beers and the sodas in there and they're all faced out, I'll close it and open it just to make sure they're all faced. Because it's a certain satisfaction you have from job well done. You have no satisfaction when you're like, I don't know what just happened. And now I just got to think better. And no matter how great your team is, I'm a big fan of culture. We're huge. A bad system will beat a good person every time. You can look for the most talented person in the world, but a poorly designed practice will crush them every time, no matter how talented they are. And if they're really talented, they'll tell you, I'm not using my talents. I'm just doing this over and over and over again. So let's talk about a little bit more about what this does and why it's so important. But when you start to do this, I'm going to tell you the first thing that happens is you're going to see a boost in productivity. A lot of times, people come into the program. Okay, what can I expect? I'm like, okay, for the first 4 to 6 months, it's really about getting organized, like getting your thoughts right, getting your systems down, writing systems, doing the same thing, being consistent. And what you see is little bumps in productivity, because dentists can reclaim their clinical time by reducing the administrative burdens through automated scheduling, billing, and task management. Harvard Business Review notes that businesses with clear operational systems experience a 20% boost in team productivity by reducing uncertainty and role confusion. I can attest that is absolutely true. And Miranda, you see that all the time when you go into practice. You're like, what is going on here? All right, we're going to stop this and we're going to organize this. What happens right away?
The biggest thing that this speaks to me in coaching or working with clients is the whole concept of E minus R equals C. And you were mentioning earlier about team members and the accountability piece and productivity for a team. A team member will be productive when they feel like they're fulfilled in their workplace. And if they feel like they're under a microscope all the time, that idea of a person isn't fulfilling their role. I often say, okay, doctor, when a coaching client might be asking about a team member or saying they feel like something's off track or somebody's not doing their job, I'm like, let's look at the system. Like, where is the breakdown in the system? Because I'm not sure it's about that person. I think it's about whatever your system, either you don't have one, and so it's just not clear what they're supposed to be doing, or there's some little crack in that system. And I'd venture to guess it's not the person, it's the actual system itself. So anytime a doctor early on in a coaching client, we're talking about the areas they think that maybe could be improved in the practice, almost always there's just not a system for it. Or there is a system, air quotes, there's nothing documented. And so there's no way to say person over person that it's replicable. I just think they're the backbone. They're the spine. The foundation is the values, getting the right people in the right seats, but without the meaty spine of it, which is your systems, culture is great, but we're not getting anything done. We're getting things done, but we're not getting things done efficiently, or we're not getting things done in a replicable way. So yeah, the systems are by far the spine of the organization. And I love that you indicated productivity, because that's different than production. Like, in the end, systems are going to boost production in your practice, but we're talking about the individual productivity and efficiency within each role and in terms of each system and what each person is doing in the practice, saving ultimately time and therefore stress on you as a leader.
100%. I totally agree. And so, the production
comes in the end.
Yeah. As always, like every time you and I talk, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have 30 more thoughts, but I can't add them here.
Back on track.
Got us back on track. Now, another thing, in addition to all the great things that Miranda said, there's 2 types of practices. You have the practice that's people dependent. You have Susie, Nancy, and Lisa, and they work up front, and they're amazing. And they work hard every single day, and man, they keep it together. And then they come to you, they corner you at the end of a day, and they go, Doc, we can't do this anymore. We need help. It's so hard. And then you go, I love you guys. Hire somebody. So you throw person after person after person at the problem instead of changing your thinking. See, the problem is never the problem. It's how you think about the problem. I love those 3 people at the front. I'm going to protect them. I want a predictable environment. And what you have to do is transition from being people dependent. People are important. They're the most important part. but you have to be systems driven, which means we have predictable processes. We train our team members. We onboard them. We don't waterboard them. We optimize things. We help them give their best energy to what matters most. And now work makes sense. Now, I'm going to show you these two graphics throughout this whole webinar so that because there's so many components of this that when you start to transition from chaos on the left to control on the right, multiple things get better on all fronts. And so one of the big things that gets better is you have better team ownership. You feel like have you ever heard the thing, you're a micromanager? Well, you're a micromanager because you can't predict anything and you're hoping something gets done. When you put systems in place, you don't have to micromanage. You have systems to do that. Systems also clarify the expectations and responsibilities. They help each team member take ownership of what they do. Here's a good question for you. Who does what? People can't answer that in adult. Who does what? Well, everybody does it. No. When everybody does it, nobody does it. So or everybody owns it, nobody owns it. So you have to reduce the micromanagement. And a study by the ADA found that dentists spend on average 28%. That's a quarter of their time doing administrative tasks rather than patient care. I see a lot of them still looking at paper. Aren't we supposed to be paperless? Why are they doing all these things? They still have sticky notes and paper everywhere instead of, there's patients sitting right there. You know what I mean? We spend all of our time doing things that really don't optimize our practice. And let me step out of dentistry, come back. I will say this forever. I think the single biggest problem in the world and your practice and in life is we don't give our best energy to things that matter most. We spend all of our energy doing things that really aren't the biggest bang for the buck or don't give us the biggest ROI or sense of fulfillment. And every time you put a system in place, it allows you to give a little bit more energy to the things that matter most, like exercising, like nutrition, like communication system, like putting an excellent financial arrangement policy in your practice allows your team, it frees up, I would say, a quarter of your team members' time up front, because they're taking care of it all at the front. Putting a great scheduling system in place reduces a fourth of the phone calls and probably a fourth of the cancellations. So I like the idea of intelligent design. And then also, too, when you talk about focus, the average adult in the United States spends 2 hours and 23 minutes on social media. That's crazy. So when we say we don't give our best energy to things that matter most, we're spending energy on things that don't matter. Now let's get back to the practice. Like I said, there's no greater fatigue than mental fatigue. So let's take that into the practice. When you leave a day like this and it's chaos, you feel empty. And that's where you make this transition. People-dependent practices are always exhausted. They feel exhausted. They talk exhausted. They use words like, it's crazy, it's busy. Systems-driven offices are motivated. They're focused. Busyness is a focus problem. So ultimately, when you put these systems in place, and we're going to get into it in a second, show you how to do it, you're going to see you're going to get more productive. Production and profitability are two different things. People are going to be engaged. And then at the end of the day, your bottom line grows. Practices with established systems reduce costly inefficiencies. You don't need 3 people to touch it. 1 person touches it. It's easy. It improves retention and increases profitability on average by about 30%. So optimizing, people are cutting costs by joining buying groups, trying to find cheaper supplies, growing an opportunity. No, don't get bigger, get better. And it's amazing how it works. Now, one more thing, people-dependent practices have very high team compensation percentages. This is a huge challenge in the world. You're looking at your profitability and you're like, well, my team compensation is 33%. If your team compensation is 33%, I'll tell you this right now. Everybody's overworked and everyone feels underpaid, including you. And you don't know where your next hire is going to come from. When you're systems driven and we have excellent systems and we have right person, right seat, you always are profitable and your team compensation is below 25% or in that range. And you're not paying people cheaply. You're paying Susie up front an amazing wage because she's got it. Does that make sense? Miranda, go.
Well, that just made me think of a story. So putting this into play, working with a team early on in coaching, and I remember getting on a call and I felt like they were already pretty administratively heavy. They had a significant number of administrative team members for the size of their practice. And we were working on a face chart. We were very early in the function and accountability chart, trying to determine what seats everyone sat in. And we got on a call and they said to me, I have great news. We hired someone for the front office. And I was like, oh, because I'm thinking we already have too many people. What do you mean? They're just so busy up there. What you were saying earlier, like they just can't keep up with everything. They're so busy. So we hired someone for the front office. They said, okay, well, what role did you hire them for? Well, for front office. And I'm like, okay, what are their accountabilities? Like what role are they going to be fulfilling in the front office? Well, we don't know what they're good at yet. And once we figure out what they're good at, we'll figure out what they're going to do. And I just thought to myself, again, like you just mentioned, team compensation, it was over 40% in this practice. And so when we're people heavy and people dependent, and we don't have systems in place, we don't identify the seat that someone should be sitting in, what the accountabilities of that person are, and have a well-defined system for all of the tasks that they're supposed to be doing, they're drained and they're all sometimes doubling up on tasks and accountabilities in the office without even knowing it. So it's definitely, this slide really spoke to me and it immediately made me think about that experience of, okay, well, let's get some boundaries in place in terms of these, 6 people, 7 people that you have in your front office. What is everybody going to be doing? And as you start to recognize like, oh, maybe we do have too many people. This is the right person. We do need an assistant because we're down. Instead of putting our efforts into hiring, now we can transition one of these awesome team members from the front to the back because we've identified where some of these inefficiencies are in the tasks that they're performing every day. And the other piece of it that you mentioned is giving our best energy to what matters most. And what matters most in the practice is the patient experience. Right. And when these team members are so focused on the chaos of the task at hand or the task that's in front of them, they can't feel like they're focusing on what's most important, which is the patient experience. The patient experience then almost becomes an interruption to the task that they're trying to figure out in that moment. So when there's more clarity to what should be done and how to do it, they're able to stop and really take care of the people that we're there to serve.
So well said. Totally agree. And it reminds me, this is probably 20 years ago. I went to see a dentist who had a huge practice. And I go, why am I here? He goes, because I realized recently I was just going to work so other people could have jobs. And I don't want to do that anymore. I love my team, but I am just working so that they can get paid. And it wasn't the team member's fault. He just kept growing and growing and growing. He was in growth mode, which I don't quite know what that is. One more thing I'll just point out if you're looking at this slide, and we talk about this a lot, another thing about intelligent design of your future is that if you are heavily dependent on PPOs, you very much have one person working at the front whose only job is insurance in your practice, and you pay their salary, but they work for all of the PPOs. Now, you can get mad about that, but that's the reality of it. And that's got to be part of your game is like, who does what and why are we doing all this? This week, To the Top is all about strategic planning. And my question to everybody that's in the room tomorrow is, what are you building and why? And so that's more important than actually figuring out team compensation and all that. But in the meantime, you can always get organized. You talk about profitability. Two of the most profitable companies in the United States are Starbucks and Apple. Apple has more cash on hand than the United States government has. I mean, they know how to make a profit. Do you tell me why I know? Because I got to buy the new iPhone every time it comes out. But when you look at this, they have more profit per square foot. And really a lot of it has, it's all systems design. Their systems are on the side of a cup when you look at Starbucks. That's why Starbucks can afford to pay full-time benefits for part-time employment, because they are so well organized in that. Now, do you have to be like them? No, but you can start with the basics, which is let's organize the work. So let's define what systems really are. These are systems. Systems are a set of interconnected components. They make sense. This is connected to this. Elements that work together in a coordinated manner to achieve a specific goal or purpose. And we'll show you some of those shortly. Systems can include everything from patient scheduling to billing protocols to financial arrangements to team roles to job descriptions to how you answer the phone. New patient telephone slip. That's a system. and it improves efficiency and effectiveness. And the big thing, once you start to get into this, again, people are very important. They're the most important component, but they don't run the business. Systems run your practice. People run the systems. So that's very important. And again, we have all of this organized back in the BPA. So go back there and you can download all of it and show it to your team. Now there's 11 considerations for designing systems. These are basically 11 questions you have to ask when you're designing a system. And we have this resource. It's right back there. You can follow it every time you create a system, and I'll show you what's in it. You have to always start with the why. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this system? Why is it needed? And why does our office, what purpose will it serve to move the practice forward? So let's talk about financial arrangements. I mean, I'll call it financial systems. Financial arrangements are super important. Here is why. Because it's important for people to pay at time of service. It's also important for us to run a profitable practice. And we also need to train the behaviors of people paying. Write this down. We teach people how to treat us in dentistry. So if people aren't paying you, you've trained them. It's okay. Don't worry about it. We're good. So it's important to have incredible financial. That's the why. We want healthy relationships with our patients, and we want a healthy business, and we want to be able to pay our team a healthy wage. So that's the why behind it. So start with the why, because if you jump into the how, you're going to miss the whole power behind why you're creating it. And you have to do this together. Now, Miranda, I want you to talk about this, but this is a huge piece. A lot of times dentists create a system and they go, I got it. Here it is. I wrote it this weekend, or I got it from my buddy while I was taking a course and he sent it over. I want you guys to read it and put it in place. So talk about this piece.
Well, the line there, there's no, without weigh-in, there's no buy-in. That's just so true. When you just give something to the team without even considering their experience in that task or in that system, they're not going to have the same level of buy-in as if they get to be participatory in what that system is. Now, there's times when, as a leader, you're going to take the lead and maybe do that first 80% and then get a bit of weigh-in. And there's other times when it's completely appropriate to delegate the creation of that system to the team members who do that day in and day out. A lot of the times, the doctor is the first one to tell you, I don't even know what they do. I wouldn't know how to file a claim, if Susie had to move on. And so when we can have the people who do that day in and day out, most of them have already thought about a more efficient and better way to do it. So let's empower them to weigh in, share their expertise, have a bit of an accountability and ownership to documenting how we should be doing this in the best way. And when the team weighs in, there's going to be more buy-in and more consistency to them implementing the system. I've heard it before where the doctors have worked through systems. They've uploaded them somewhere into an intraweb in their office. The team doesn't even know how to get into it. We have all these systems and the team's like, we do? Like, where do they live? And so the team has to really be a part of weighing in and giving their voice. And honor their ideas, because sometimes they're bringing an idea into the mix that you would have never thought about that is gold.
Yeah. Love it. Absolutely love it. Another key piece to it is you have to brainstorm about what you're currently doing, trying to figure it out and then delivering it. Or there are sometimes like, let's talk about what we're currently doing. What practices do we want to keep? There are some things you should stop doing too, instead of, start doing. What do we need to change ergonomically, process-wise? Who says what? Here's one. A lot of times people just throw the bombs at the front and then take off. Maybe we could start the conversation in the back about what the appointment is going to be. My heart goes out to anybody administratively here, because if your team is not really well organized and there's not a good tone from the top, a lot of people just throw bombs at you, and you have to figure them out clinically, time-wise. There's no expectations. Patients don't know what this is going to cost. And that's not either. So a good part of brainstorming is like, how do we do this so that it's nothing but net when we get up to the front? People already know I'm going to come in at 7 a.m. for this appointment. I know it's going to be this much. I know it's going to be 4 hours. So I think those are important considerations when you design a system. Let's throw it all on the table about what we're currently doing. And then another consideration is what steps have to be taken that are specific We always say specific is terrific. They're measurable, they're actionable, and they can help you achieve your goal. Do you want to speak to this one at all?
Well, I mean, anytime we create a new system, unless we're measuring it and creating some type of measurable, actionable data point, how are we going to know if it's working, if it's impacting the practice in a positive way? So this is where you start to marry some of those pieces around being aligned around a system, and then the smart piece, which is having a data point. Also, you have to have a start and end time. We can't be developing this system forever. So we want to have a measurable time frame. We're going to start working on this in quarter one. Quarter one starts on this date, and we really want to finish this by the end of quarter one. Quarter one ends on this date. And at the end of that time, at this date that we indicate the system will be completed, we're also going to have a couple of key performance indicators, key measurable points that are going to help us to know moving forward, is it hitting the mark or not? If we're still off track in the future, we might need to revisit that system. If things look like they're getting better, then we're crushing it and we're doing the right thing. But without having those measurables, we don't know if what we're putting into place is really working or not.
Yeah, I totally agree. Very well said. And I'll give you two right away off the top of our head. We talk about collections here a lot, especially if you've been through anything that we teach on gaps. When you design a financial arrangements system, you should collect 100% of your net production, period, exclamation point, possibly 103%. It should never, a poorly designed financial arrangement system will get you to 92%, meaning you're leaving 8% on the table. Another one, we have a hygiene capacity tracker system that we use here. All of your hygienists should always be at 92 to 95%. That's when the system is designed really well. So when we talk about specific and measurable, that's when you know the system is designed really well and it's working. It's not just, okay, try this. So there's got to be
a pain point that a lot of practices have is like holes in the schedule, like the palpations you get as a doctor when you see holes in the schedule. And our immediate response is like, why can't Susie keep the schedule full? Like, why do we have holes? Is she not even trying? What's going on up there? Because we're trying to work, and do our dentistry. And it's just like, it's sitting over here, just like driving us crazy. And if we have a cancellation system or cancellation policy in place, we've talked about it as a team. We know what our steps are and our plans are for when we get a short notice change. If we have a system designed for how we reappoint and build value in the appointment. So then we have, there's two systems just right there that you could develop in the practice, that if the team is aligned around them, we know how to do it. Now we're looking at that capacity number and our cancellation and no-show reschedule rates. And we have two systems and two data points that are telling us what's really going on around holes in the schedule, instead of just being driven by the feelings and the anxiety that we get when we see those holes.
Yeah. And what Miranda just said, when you have that designed and it's working, you're not like, what is Susie doing back there? You're not blaming a person. You're re-engineering the system to support your people. So important in this process. Another consideration is you have to identify the who are the key players in charge of implementing the system. Now, this is something it took 20 some years for me to figure out. I'm the last person in the world that should ever document, organize, re-engineer a system. I can add vision, I can add thoughts, but I'm not the person to do that. So if you're watching this and you're like, well, we've tried this. One of the questions I'm going to ask you to consider is who is doing it? Chris is amazing. She's actually here today. I'm afraid when she walks through here, I just sit up a little bit straighter, so she is amazing. She can get all of it done. It's documented. You can see she actually gets joy from it. I've never been to her house, but we're going to take a field trip to her house, Miranda, and we're just going to go in her kitchen and open up her drawers. I feel like they're going to be all organized and little things. It's going to be amazing. But what that speaks to is there are people that are really good at details and organizing. So that's one of the questions you have to ask.
And Kirk, if you don't mind me sharing another real life example,
Please.
I was talking with a team not too long ago, and they have block scheduling. They have a system for scheduling. They know it's color coded. When do we put high production where? When do we put low production where? Where do we put emergencies? And what they're finding is that they're frustrated because day over day, the schedule is not following that system. And so then there's this lack of, like you said, lack of predictability. Sometimes it feels chaotic. Some days feel exhausting, while other days feel like they're not productive. And when we get on a coaching call, my first question is, okay, on your function and accountability chart who's accountable ultimately for your scheduling system. And if you have a person on your administrative team that sits in that seat and their accountability, they own the schedule following that system. Now you have someone to connect with, and you can pull up that system together, and you can sit down as the leader and you can say, the schedule is not following that magic recipe that we all put together. And I don't think it's for lack of effort on your part. I really want to look at this system with you and see where the gaps are. Is there something we need to tweak? Is there something that's not documented because we're missing a step somewhere because we're not fulfilling it day over day? And it makes it easier to then hold that person who owns it accountable because it's not personal about their performance. It's us sitting together looking at the system. Now, in the end, perhaps that person's not following the system, and that will come out in that conversation. But oftentimes it's just that there's some little gap, there's some lack of clarity in what the day-to-day, there's a step missing. And once you can identify what that is, great. So when you have someone who owns it, there's also a better opportunity for accountability.
I love that. And when you have somebody who owns it, like you just said, we use the phrase around here, you're not really a leader till you grow other leaders that grow other leaders. They don't need an amazing title. It could be just a team member that you care about that owns a function, owns a system. And that's where you as a leader can think, I'm not going to do it all. I'm not going to micromanage all this. I'm going to grow this person so that they own it. I'm going to send them to a course. We're going to optimize the system. They feel so proud to be part of that, improvement in your practice to what you said. It's so cool. And that's a huge shift in the way that you work. So it's important. Now, I stole this from Strategic Coach, which is a program I went through, and I love that. And it made me think, because Miranda organizes all of our content here. But one of the things they always say is you have to learn delegation. The first step is find the right person to delegate, because I did it for a long, I would delegate things to somebody who was just like me. And I'm like, they're going to get it done. So you got to pick, you have to be specific. This is what we're talking about. And just like you mentioned, Miranda, we have to track progress and be available. This is where you can do a check-in. Go, how are we doing? You can determine the levels of authority. If you own it, you make the decision, you decide. And then we're going to establish a time frame. That's one of my favorite is I don't like things that are not time bound. When we say, well, we're just going to get it done. No, by when? That's an important metric, an important number. So keep that in mind as you start to think about who's going to do these. Now, another consideration is you have to anticipate problems that are going to arise. This way, you're less likely to get stuck when they do. You can call it out. And maybe if you're a visionary, you can see that. You're going to we're going to design this, but I can already tell you there's going to be a problem when it comes to this. Anything come to mind, Miranda? I'll start with one. If we're going to design a system for our new hours, this is a great one. We have a lot of teams that are working crazy hours. They go from evening hours. And then some people, you don't have to do this, but we have a lot of people in our community that go 7 to 3 straight 8s. Well, one of the problems that you're going to have is we can't come in. Those are when I work. I have to work all day. Another one is we have teachers. And John O'Bowder, shout out to him. He helped us with this one. He's I knew this was coming. And so teachers can't make it in when we change 7 to 3. There are days in which you work in which teachers do not. True? He said those are VIP teacher days. It's brilliant. Thank you, Jono. They proactively, the first thing they did was they pulled the data. We have a lot of teachers. Well, how many? 11. There's 11? Yeah. So they called all 11 and let them know you're one of the most important people on the planet because you're a teacher. We have teacher VIP days. These are days in which teachers don't work, but we do. Let's get you scheduled. As a result, they got more teachers. That's a problem you're anticipating. What most dentists do is think in terms of exceptions. You think of the one person that this new system is not going to work for, and you put your entire future on hold. You as a leader have to anticipate the problems and say, this is coming. Let's work on this one. Anything come to mind for you, Miranda, on this?
Not as a specific example for a system, but I just think is really good to not just brush over in that there's 2 things that need to happen every time you're developing a system. And in our coaching process with the system templates that we use, we have these blocks right at the bottom that encourage the team to stop and think about exactly what you just said. What are some potential challenges or roadblocks to what we're developing? And the second box is around what do we expect as benefits? Like, what do we think will work out really well from implementing the system? So we're thinking of what might arise on the negative and the positive from this so that we stay motivated. And it's important to leave space and be encouraging of that contrary thought or that contrary opinion of what might go wrong, because it does help us think a little bit deeper and get ahead of some of those problems. In some practices, we like to just keep things hunky-dory and, we're conflict averse. And so sometimes conflict can be a good thing if we bring up like, hey, I'm thinking though, I'm hearing this, the system's going great, but what if this happens? Or what if that happens? And giving the freedom and the space and the voice and having an open forum within your team and within your development time to put that devil's advocate voice in the room and be okay to stop for a minute and reflect on like pieces we might have missed or something that might present itself as a challenge. So I love the example that you gave.
Yeah. I love being devil's advocate when you're talking because I can already hear the rah when we present new ideas. Remember, new ideas will always have a lot of resistance. Always. So get ready. Here it comes. And another consideration.
And it's not a bad thing. It can bring really good ideas
totally.
Into the room. So
yeah. Another consideration, is there a time frame or a frequency that must be followed for maximum output and success? This is important. How long should this be done? A big one that comes to mind for us is accounts receivable. There are very specific timeframes that have to be met when it comes to managing AR, or you're losing thousands and thousands of dollars and ruining relationships. So keep in mind, is there a time frequency or time frame that needs to be met?
Just real quick, one more thing is all of these are considerations because each office's systems are going to be unique to your practice. If you're a small practice and you're running an AR or your billing system, you might just send statements once a month, all in one bulk process. If you're a large practice with 3, 4, 5 providers and 7,000 patients, you might not want to send them all in bulk because you're going to get 5,000 calls the very next day. You might want to change your system to a frequency or a time bound that breaks that up into smaller segments where you're sending them out in groups over the week. So when you think about the time frame or the time bound, it's when is this happening? How frequently does it need to happen? And there is no right or wrong answer. It's what's right for your particular practice in your situation.
Totally agree. And with that, another consideration is like, okay, when we're going to create this, I have an idea and I'm going to make it perfect. Don't try to make anything perfect. What's the best way to create the finished system? Sometimes, I wouldn't say sometimes, most times done is better than perfect. Every time done is better than perfect. We use a phrase around here called MVP, minimum viable product, because you're going to get better. You're going to learn more. I'm not asking you to be mediocre, but sometimes you just got to get the basics up, the scaffolding for this, and then we'll add the flesh and bones later of how we're all going to do this so that we can all stay aligned. We're going to learn a lot in this whole process. And again, you can find all those resources back there because there's tons and tons of examples of specifically how to apply that to each and every system. Another consideration is you got to ask good questions. Do this as a leader. Don't talk. Stop talking. Just ask questions. Go, I'm curious. Be a curious person and then ask more and stay engaged. How's it going? I'm curious about this. I'm curious about that. So I got to do a better job of that. I listen to too much stuff and I have a thought. So that's not always good. But that's one thing you can always do is like, if you don't know what's going on, just ask questions. Because when you don't, you're feeding that story. You're telling yourself that nothing is getting done and that's a bad story and it comes out of your lips. Questions slow that down or change the nature of what you're trying to learn in this whole process. In the end, all-in commitment is the most important thing to move forward. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing beats having a group of people that are all in. Hey, look, it's not great right now. It's not perfect, but we're going to make this happen. So it's pretty cool. And then a final consideration is you can implement a timeline for reevaluating. A lot of our practices, I'll just tell you what we do. They create the systems and then they create a timeline to reevaluate. They'll say, we're going to revisit this in 12 months. And like Adriana Booth said at one time, she's like, you got to ask yourself when you reevaluate, is this system still applicable? And is it still working? Or have we changed a few things? Some of you watching this wrote systems 20 years ago, and they're still in the binder up front in the cabinet that nobody's looked at. So we need to reevaluate them to identify what worked and what didn't work, because by doing that continuously, you're always growing in a good way. And I like this one. I think another consideration, just put in bullet point system. We're going to talk about the structure of it, but sometimes just starting with a simple checklist and bullet points is a great way to get everybody on the same page. The other thing it does is it helps break old habits. When I've been doing it the same way, you give me a written document, I'm just going to keep doing it the same way, because these are the 7 most expensive words in business. That's the way we've always done it. When you don't create a structure, a framework for people to do it, it's not their fault. They're just trying to get it done, and that's all they know. So starting with a basic checklist is often the best way to change behavior or results in your practice. And then consider putting your system in bullet point format. I think we already talked about it. I had that in their slide 2 times. I love this stuff. I can do this all day long. Now, we're in the home stretch here. So if you're still here, thank you. And we'll answer questions in a little bit. If it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. It's what you said earlier, Miranda. People go, I have a system for that. Where is it? Well, Judy does it. No. It's got to be written down. Talking about a system isn't merely enough. You have to document your systems. Writing them down forces you to create that extra level of clarity. Now, there's 5 tips for writing your systems. The first one is this: use a template. We're going to show you one shortly. It's helpful. You can follow it. You're going to see, I was just looking in Google Drive this morning, and a lot of the great practices we have, it's the same thing, except the title's changed. I was looking at some of our top practices. They look like the same.
It's less chaos for your mind when you go in and look at those digital systems, when they all have that same style and aesthetic.
100%. So I like a template too. And what font type and style will be used? Now, this is important. You just can't randomize it, because, again, that's fatiguing when everything's in different fonts and it's all over the place. Details do matter. Number 3, where will your systems live? Are they digital? Are they in a binder? Are they both? Here at Accidental, we go back and forth. I like paper. Behrendt likes paper. Our team loves digital. So we kind of have to make it for everybody. So it's important. And then, how is everybody going to sign off on the final draft? I love having everybody signing off in a dental practice, going, I'm in. Once you put your signature on that, it's important. So how are we going to do that? And then set a revision date. We talked about that. Says they're living, breathing documents, and we just can't set it and forget it. So think about those 5 things when you're creating a system. Now, one other thing I want to mention, and again, I borrow this straight from Dan Sullivan. This changed my life. It changed a lot of people's lives in the Accidental community. I share as much as possible. Don't shoot for 100% when you're designing a system. Shoot for 80% every single time. Now, let me explain how this works. Any task, 100% of it, it's overwhelming. And 2 things get in the way: perfectionism and procrastination. I got to design this, but I'll do it next week. Or I'll do it in 3 weeks when I have some time. Or I'm going to design it perfectly before I bring it to my team. No. Get to 80% as fast as possible. A lot of times when we have to design something, boom, I'm just going to get to 80%. So when you have 100% of a task and you get to 80% of it, you've just accomplished 80%. It's a great way to start. Like, here it is. Sometimes I'll just do a drawing and I'll hand it to Chris or Miranda or Behrendt, and they'll go, what the heck is this? I'll explain later. And then the next time you touch it, improve it another 80%. For example, here at Accidental, a lot of times it's a concept. Here's the concept. Here's how I want it to look. We'll give it to Chris. Chris will go, thank you. And she'll add a lot of detail and she'll improve it another 80%. So when you take a task and you get to 80%, and then you take the remaining balance, which is 20%, and improve it another 80%, you are now at 96% complete. That's powerful. We might look at it as a leadership team after Chris has touched it, and we only improve it, tweak the graphics a little bit, make one change. We're going to improve the remaining balance, which is 4%, 80%. Now you are at 99.2%. Always think of these iterations or these movements of 80%. We're just going to get to 80%, and we're going to improve it another 80%. Usually something doesn't need to be touched more than 3 times. If you apply the 80% rule, Most every time, 3 touches, it's good. Now you're at 96%, and that is excellent in most cases. So use this process when you're designing a system, like what we're going to show you shortly. Sometimes in a team meeting, you can concept it out. You can hand it to the right team member. He or she will say, I'll put some details to it. I'll bring it back to you next week. It's in Google Doc format. Great. Let's make some changes. Send it to the graphic designer. We're good. That's how it works in most dental practices. So you can keep moving and keep improving and implementing the systems. Now, they allow you to answer these key questions. You have to do them in a system. It's really quite straightforward. We always say here, specific is terrific, vague is the plague. Don't be vague, be specific. A system has to answer these key questions. Number 1, what is it? Number 2, why are we doing this? Number 3, who's going to do it? Not everybody, but who's going to do it? Number 4, where do we do it? Do we do this at the front? Do we do this at the back? Do we do it at the end of the day? When do we do it? Are these things done in the morning, done in the afternoon? And then how do we do it? What are the steps? I can't even talk. Specific directives for how we implement these things. So you can really create a great system if you just ask these questions and answer them in the whole process. And so we have this resource. You can have it if you want, but it actually has a guideline for how to create a system. This is how you do it. And so it's back there. It's the how. It's actually how to create even the checklist in the process, and then some other questions you need to ask when you're designing the systems. But it's important. Now, I'll take a breath here. Any thoughts before we keep going? I'm going to show you the 7 essential systems, and then we're done and we'll answer questions. But any thoughts?
Yeah. And I feel like, and I'm going to put a link for the 7 essential systems, the link to the BPA in the chat, just so everybody has it, because we're going to be so high level on these today. We're not getting into the, meat and potatoes of each one of these, because each one could be its own webinar. So just take a look at the chat, everyone who's still hanging on, because as we run through these, you can get a more in-depth analysis of each one with the examples that Kirk was sharing and the link that I'm going to post in the chat.
Yeah. There's a speaker in dentistry. He's a friend of mine. I was watching him speak, and he said there's 220 systems in a dental practice. I was like, oh, Lord, there may be. I doubt there is. I'm like, there's 7, and we even years ago, we came up with 39 that organized 90% of the work. So today we'll give you the 7 essentials. So if you don't do any of this, just do 7. Get them right. And by designing these 7, you're going to see they fix other problems in your practice. These are the critical ones. Number 1 is your communication rhythms system. How do we communicate? Because when you create a consistent communication rhythm system, it creates trust. People know what to expect. They know what you're trying to say. It enhances the relationships you have with your team. It facilitates learning. It also creates collaboration. People feel like they're part of something. And I'll give you a couple examples. I don't know if I put them in the slides here. Yeah, I actually did. So we have these, again, I was back in BPA. I was like, there's a lot of resources back there. But one of them is just having a weekly team meeting. Now, I know what you're thinking. I don't want to do a weekly team meeting because they're terrible. 2 hours with your team when you land the airplane, and work with them on improving all of your systems, usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning. It makes a huge statement. It says, number 1, you're important. Number 2, those patients come second. And we're going to improve. When you commit to a weekly communication rhythm of a 2-hour team meeting, I promise you your practice is going to get better if it's done correctly. You're going to fix problems before they happen. People are going to go, I totally get it. They're going to feel part of the solution. You'll be able to do all of those things that you're talking about. Here's my question of many. Do you care about your team? Everyone watching this would go, yes, I do. Well, what do you do that supports what you just said? If you take them bowling every once in a while, that's not like communication rhythms are like, I'm going to commit to learning with my team and communicating with them on a daily basis. So communication rhythms can include a weekly team meeting. I'll make a deal with you. Here's the deal. If you're working 40 clinical hours a week, don't do that anymore. Cut it back to 32. You can run a great practice on 32. And then I want you to cut it again. Go from 32 clinical hours to 30 and give your team 2 hours of great team development, great communication, great systems development. I promise you, your collections, your production, and your happiness will go up. But some of you are like, no, I got to do a filling. No, like do a team meeting. So you can do check-ins too, which we're big fans of. But your practice has to have a system for how you communicate regularly with team members, not on the fly, not reactively, not when things go bad, but how do we proactively communicate with team members? And that's your first system. The second system is financial policy. Every practice, no matter what you do, you have to have a firm financial policy. Now, don't use the word policy. I don't like the word policy, but you have to have one. It's a written agreement that benefits the patient, you, and the practice, and it's set up so it lends itself to healthy relationships. I actually pulled this one from a great practice. She's an awesome dentist in the To the Top Study Club. It doesn't have to be complex. It's simple. It clearly outlines your responsibility as a patient, our responsibility, and how this is going to work before we start treatment, where insurance fits in, when it's due. I'm going to have you sign this. We're going to sign this, and it all is documented. So keep it as simple as possible, but clear as possible, because this is going to be this will be one of many hiccups you have. When you don't have any clarity around this, it creates conflict, which ultimately becomes a crisis. A third system is managing accounts receivable. Now, we talked about this earlier, but you have to have a system for managing money that's owed to you. And when it grows out of control, you're going to find that people owe you money, don't like you. It can destroy the relationship and the profitability of your practice. So we've got a great system. It's back in BPA. It's actually a 14-page guide. I was going to put it all in here. I'm like, it's too much information. So just go back there. You can get it. It'll actually show you exactly what to do and how to design an amazing AR system. Another system is scheduling. And scheduling is a huge part of your success. Time is the new rich. I think we all can agree with that. But like, how do you do that in a dental practice? Where do people go for what procedures? And you have to have a scheduling system in place. Another system of the 7 is your new patient experience. Your patients get one shot at experiencing your practice up front. This is where you show them we're different. This is where you establish the relationship. This is where you create tremendous value before we even get to the chair. And this is how you set your practice up for success and ultimately teach people how to treat you long-term. And they refer other people that behave the same way. It's all done in the new patient experience. And I pulled one up, like, this is the practice we were talking about.
This one is a really good example, Kirk, too, of the template with the what, the why, the who, the when, the where, and the how. So this one does a really good job of displaying all of those 6 questions that you were showing us just a few minutes ago in that really clear templated aesthetic.
Yeah. Now, this practice is near and dear to my heart. It's a practice that Miranda coaches. They are committed to being the best they can be. Now, here's why documenting that is so important, because you as a dentist, you go to all this education and you think everything should be at this level. You can't bring people with you without giving them the frameworks or the scaffolding and how to do that. You can't assume they're going to pick this up by osmosis, by listening to you every once in a while or hearing your platitudes every once in a while. You got to write it down. This is what it means to me and the practice and why, and this is where you do that in this whole process. Another system is your hygiene recare system. It's an important piece. It's one of the most important pieces. Let's pause for a second. Let me think of it. You're a dental practice. People are coming to your office every day going, here's my appointment. If I had a sandwich shop across the street, I got to get new people to come in every day. You have a full schedule of customers that are lined up every day to come in your office. Isn't that cool? Wouldn't you want to optimize that so people could come predictably and you could make it better every time and the quality of the patient could get better every time? This is a huge one where you don't set it and forget it. This is one of the greatest gifts that the dental practice model has. It's a built-in customer system. Make sure it operates at its highest level and it's congruent with your vision. And so you've got to have great clarity around the recare appointment system that you have in place. And I pulled one this morning from a great practice that we have not too far. So well done. Every step. Now they're very detailed on this, but this is where it's a very large collection.
Specific is terrific. Vague is the play.
Yeah. So Now, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I think if I went to work here, I could figure it out in a relatively short period of time. Instead, do you want people to figure it out, or do you want to train everybody one by one? So you can train them, but like give them some help here. And then lastly is the unscheduled treatment system. Do you want to speak to this one before we wrap it up?
Sure. In the same way that the hygiene recare system keeps the patients tethered to the practice, moving through and returning, and it's like like you said, your internal kind of customer relations module. The unscheduled treatment system does the same thing. It's doing two things. One, it's helping to keep your schedule stay full so that profitability is always front of mind, but it's also helping to make sure that we are serving the people that we have a responsibility to serve. They've entrusted us with their care, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we're doing everything we can to follow up with them. And just like the hygiene recare system, the consistency on unscheduled treatment is so important. This one generally starts as soon as the patient walks out of the practice without scheduling treatment. And then we're consistently making touch points. And it has to be documented in that way as to how often we're doing this, how consistently, when do we stop and let it roll back into the hygiene recare system? Who's going to do this? All those same 6 questions come into play. But the most important thing around this one is it's building the future profitability and productivity of the practice.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. So as you start to do this, we'll give you some final thoughts. Here's what I want you to do. Design the 7 essential systems. Use a framework like Miranda mentioned, create a template with those 5 questions, and you're off and running. Things will get better. You'll slowly see it go from chaos to control. You'll go, wow, I just feel better. Feel like it's more organized. You're going to need a time frame to do that. You can't do it after work. You can't ask your team members to stay late. That's where the team meeting becomes the fulcrum for how you do this. And when you do this, you're going to see that you're going to be able to empower your team. You can define these clear systems and help each team member understand their role and their responsibilities. Everyone's going to know what to do by default, just by following this process. It's going to lighten the load. You're going to see people when you design systems go, I didn't know you did that. I do that all the time. I'm like, I didn't even know you did that. So it creates a lot of positive, elements of the work, and people don't feel underappreciated as much anymore. It's going to boost your efficiency. You're going to streamline so many tasks. You as a dentist, now I'll tell you, there's a downside to this. Once you start to get into this, you're going to go, I don't believe we do that. Like, what a waste of time. Don't get mad. Just ask questions. And by doing it the right way, you're going to streamline things so much better collectively with your team's help. And you're going to save time. Some of you don't have any time to waste. This is where you get your time back. And remember, by implementing these systems, you're going to boost productivity. You're going to boost profitability. It gives you more time for treating the patients that you love. And it also gives you time away from the practice. You're going to be able to adapt and evolve to, as you move more into digital, you change how you want your patients to experience your practice. You're going to have to review this and change it a little bit. And then you can revisit them quarterly. The whole idea is to create a relatively predictable system in improving your business all the time. So that's what I have. So I'm going to stop sharing here. I know I went long.
I'm really proud of you. Only 3 minutes. So that's pretty impressive.
That's not bad, right? I had so many other things I want to add, but the whole goal of this webinar is to give you the framework. It's the 7 systems, it's the 5 questions, and it's the why behind it, and a whole bunch of examples. Again, if you struggle with this, go back into BPA. There's so many back there. Examples, frameworks, questions. One of the resources I didn't put in here is when you design a financial arrangement system, we actually have a checklist of 55 questions that pressure test your financial arrangement system. All you have to do is ask yourself, does it do this? Does it do that? It'll, just by answering those questions, you'll pressure test your financial arrangement system to be the right one for your practice. Love it. Any questions from anyone?
I've kind of been answering them as we've gone along. Most people were just looking for, where do I see those examples? So I put some links in the chat. I also did put the CE in the chat. I want to make sure I say that out loud for anybody who's not just watching the chat. If you wanted CE from the webinar, that's in the chat as well. But otherwise, there isn't anything that's unanswered at this point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on, Miranda. I'm going to leave you with one last thought. Every time you create a system, you save thousands and thousands of hours in the future. So the important work, this is hard, but every time you do it, you're saving so much time in the future. So start the journey. Miranda, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you guys for listening. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And until we see you guys next time, keep having a better practice and better life. And join us for To the Top. We'll see you soon. Have a great day, everybody.